Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ACGC Roundtable entitled Demonstrating Leadership in Unprecedented Times. It's great to have so many of you with us. My name is Cynthia Loren. I'm the founder and lead strategist at Loren Gold Consulting, an Africa-focused business advisory service which works with law firms and in-house legal teams across Africa. Myself and my colleague Nankunda Katangaza, director of Hook Tangaza, co-founded ACGC earlier this year, and we're thrilled by the response so far. I understand from the registrations that for today's roundtable, we have in-house counsel who will be joining us from Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Tanzania. So welcome to you all. Hopefully most of you have joined our LinkedIn community and also have shared your contact details with us for the ACGC distribution list. If you haven't done that, please do get in touch with me so that we can ensure that you're kept up to date with everything that's happening with this new community. Today's event is intended as a roundtable discussion. There will be 4 broad areas that we will cover, and this will be led by a number of discussants and a moderator who you can see in front of you. I will shortly introduce our discussion moderator for the day, and the moderator will in turn introduce the various discussants, and then we'll begin. Before we do, I just want to set a few ground rules, housekeeping instructions. The main objective for today's roundtable is to share knowledge. So although the discussion is being led by our distinguished panel, we do invite you to contribute your views and to share your observations on the things that are being discussed today. And you can do that in a number of ways. Firstly, there is a Q&A function, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Please use that to ask questions and even to share observations on what's being discussed. We will have a dedicated Q&A section at the end of the formal discussion. When you're sharing your questions or asking your questions, please do state your name and indicate your organization and or industry. That will help us with contextualizing responses. The second way for you to participate today is that we will be launching a number of live polls during the session. The way that will work is that at strategic points during the discussion, you will see a poll flash up in your screen, and it will ask you a question and provide you with a series of options for the answers. I will leave the poll running for a couple of minutes just so that you have time to read the question and also respond. And then I will launch or share the results so that you can see what people have said in response to the question. This will be a great way for you to see what those in different jurisdictions and sectors have responded, the ways in which they've responded. The final way that you can interact is also through the chat function. We will be leaving the chat function available in case you have things that you want to ask that don't relate to the discussion at hand. So if you're having logistical issues, you're having problems with your audio, or you want to flag something, then please do use the chat function to communicate with yourself and the team. If I could just quickly ask that our panelists put themselves on mute, so that, yeah, there isn't any background. Okay, so it gives me great pleasure to introduce our erudite moderator, Darren Adefolu. Darren is the governance executive at Old Mutual, and in this role, she wears 3 hats as Group Company Secretary, Head of Legal, and Chief Compliance Officer. Darren has extensive private practice and in-house legal compliance experience, having worked at leading Nigerian firm Udo Doma Bello Sage and also at Union Bank of Nigeria. Darren is a fellow of the Winboard Institute, an executive education program for women on boards, and she was very recently recognized by the leading ladies in Africa as one of top 50 women in corporate Nigeria. So good afternoon, Darren. Welcome. Thank you so much for generously agreeing to moderate this afternoon's roundtable discussion. I will hand over to you now so that you can introduce our very distinguished panel and share your observations for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was a very kind introduction. So indeed, I am Darren Adefolu, and I must welcome all participants to today's forum, being handled by the African Corporate and Government Council Forum. The theme, as Cynthia rightfully stated, is demonstrating leadership in unprecedented times. And I will just go ahead and discuss a few points before we commence the program. I would also reiterate the housekeeping rules that Cynthia had mentioned. Just make sure to use the Q&A. Any question you have, please put in the Q&A function, because I believe all participants are on mute. And you also have the chat functionality. If you have any troubleshooting issues, these are being monitored in real time, so please use your chat functionality. I will now proceed to introduce all our discussants. In no particular order, the first person I will introduce is Miriam Kachuku. She's an oil and gas industry veteran, and she's the general counsel at Seplex Petroleum Development Company, PLC. The second discussant is Bidemi Ademola, who leads the legal and corporate secretarial function for both Nigeria and Ghana at Unilever. The third discussant we have today is Sheyi Oni. He heads the legal and corporate governance function at Jumia Nigeria, a position he has held since inception of the group. And then the fourth panelist we have is Naomi Amobi. Naomi has a keen interest in African startups, and she's the legal and regulatory counsel at Paystack. Our fifth discussant is Sheye Kosoko. He is an industry expert. He's a company secretary of FBN Holdings, chairman FBN Quest Trustees, and director of FBN Insurance Brokers. We also have Sheriff Sam Mwendwa, who works in the public sector, and he's the deputy director, litigation and compliance at the Parliament of Kenya. Welcome to all our discussants. Before we go straight into the program of the day, I will just share a few thoughts about our theme, which is leadership in unprecedented times. I believe for General Counsel, this presents a unique opportunity for us to actually take a step back and think about what we can do to reflect or change how we've been working pre-COVID-19. And a good example of what I will use to buttress this point is even the topical issue of work from home. Prior to the inception of the pandemic, there was a belief that most employees could not work from home, or at least there was some reluctance to that. And based on the realities, we have actually seen that most people, even in the unconventional roles, are working from home both effectively and productively. So the point I'm making is, as GCs and as heads of legal in our various sectors, you will find that we've done things that were formerly deemed impossible or not can be done remotely. We've been having board meetings, AGMs. So before we go in, let's all reflect on the fact that this presents an opportunity for us to challenge the limits of what we can or cannot do in the present situation. I will now go straight to the question or the order for the day. I have a few topics that we're going to discuss on, going through market perspectives, leadership, and even our liaison with external lawyers. And the first question I have is to Marian. What should the General Counsel be mindful of in respect of the contractual and data protection issues in light of COVID-19 realities? What are your views?
Thank you very much, Darren. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session. I'd like to seize the opportunity and say thank you to Cynthia and Nankunda for this opportunity to speak. I do agree with you, Darren, that these are unprecedented times, and they've presented a number of new contractual, commercial, reputational risks to the company and hence the General Counsel and the legal team, and some very critical data protection issues that have been put on the table. So I'll start first, like you raised, in relation to employees. I remember when I came back from the UK after about a 19-year stint working there, and I came back to Nigeria, and I asked about working from home. The first thing I was told was, oh, there's no policy about that, and I asked why, and I realized there was a certain level of mistrust between employees and their employers in relation to working from home. They also saw the very valid point about infrastructure. and how possible it was for people to work from home in an effective manner. However, we've been thrown into this COVID-19 situation and we've all been working from home. So employers have been forced to accept that working from home works. Yes, there are challenges, and they throw up some contractual issues. So for instance, do we need to be reviewing our employment contracts to recognize flexible working options? Do we need to be building those things into our employment policy for the company? However, there are some legal issues that those throw up. So for instance, if you're allowing people work from home, whether it be 2 days a week, 3 days a week, once a week, or even 5 days a week, does it mean that their homes have become their workplace? How does that align with the workman's compensation insurance? If anything happened from a safety perspective at home, who's liable for that? If, for instance, because people haven't set up their homes for working and don't have the relevant infrastructure like their chairs and they develop back problems, who's responsible for that? Should we be talking about maybe giving our employees more money to kit out a place in their home for working? Should we go and inspect it? That sort of thing. What of their Wi-Fi infrastructure? Are we supposed to help them with it, contribute to upgrading their Wi-Fi so that they will work better? So these are some of the issues that we'll have to think about at GCs, supporting the HR department to adapt different flexible measures in the employment contracts and policies to enable the new virtual reality we find ourselves in. However, it also throws out a lot of other contractual issues. So you find that in this period, we've had to go back to contract to totally review our contracts and look at interpretation of contracts, the force majeure clauses there, look at whether we needed to renegotiate contracts, the terms and conditions of those contracts, termination provisions, suspension provisions. So my company is in the oil and gas industry, so you will find that some of the examples I'm going to give will come from the oil and gas industry. So for instance, when you're looking at force majeure, you need to look at your force majeure provisions and find out whether they even cover epidemics and pandemics. If they don't, what are you going to do? What if you have rig contracts that are suddenly you find you can't continue with your work program and you have to renegotiate the rig contracts? Even where force majeure applies, you will find that in traditional rig contracts, there was a standby rate you had to pay even during force majeure. But that didn't take into consideration a situation where the entire world is on lockdown. And then you have to ask, as a company that's struggling with a low oil price and a lockdown, should I really be paying a standby for a rig that has maybe made a lot of money from the company doing all the wells? And the response usually is, oh, that's how rig contracts are. And I'm saying, unprecedented times, we should be reviewing these sorts of provisions and align them to what we have today. So you find you always have to challenge those things. And then even where there's no force majeure, a lot of contractors are looking at things like frustration, they are looking at things like specific performance, all those different kinds of provisions in a contract. But you find you always, as a general counsel, as a legal department, you have to work with the supply chain colleagues and the user departments that own these contracts to really do a review of it. And while you're doing that, you then look at what there will be delays. What are the potential delays for your infrastructure projects, for instance? How are you going to deal with that? You've gone out to the market and you've announced that this project is going to come on stream maybe Q1 2020. And all of a sudden, because the supply chain processes, whether they're in the country or outside the country, have been affected by the lockdown, and even if they're not claiming force majeure, they're coming to tell you, listen, there's a delay. How are you going to deal with that? How are you going to deal with the reputational risks there? So there are a lot of issues that this throw up, but you really need to sit down and very creatively look through your contract and also creatively try to find solutions, because the business is looking to legal to really help it out here. They're looking to legal to come and renegotiate this contract and also bring commercial solutions to these things. It's not always the core legal argument you're going to bring to the table, because you're trying to implement a contract during a period that you never ever anticipated and nobody actually has solutions. So we've had to really, really push these things far. Now, going on to things like your loan documents, you really need to go and look at them. What are issues like material adverse change, material adverse effects? If you need to notify some of your counterparties, when do you need to notify them? So a lot of these issues have come up, and we've dealt with them on one by one, and also a very strategic approach to it. But that brings me to data protection. Now we're all working from home, virtual environment. In a place like Nigeria, we had really struggled with data protection, confidentiality, security of data before. Now we're working in a virtual environment where people are more relaxed, and the dangers with data have come forth. So there are questions we need to be asking as a legal department and working with the higher risk functions within the company to make sure that we're dealing with. So for instance, data collection. Are you looking at the disclosures that you've made to collect data? Are you looking at the reasons you've given for collecting that data? Are you looking at the processing and asking, is this really necessary? We may have been doing it before, maybe manually, but now that we're going to do it virtually, is this really necessary, and does it really align to the purpose for which we said we're going to collect the data? What of the security? Do you have a protective security structure in place for dealing with data storage? And then the framework for ensuring the integrity of confidentiality of the data. How are you dealing with data sharing and external parties? Yes, under COVID-19, health data is one of the main things. And I've squirmed in myself when in the past I heard, oh, someone from this company tested positive, and the name came right after that. I'm like, how did that happen? How did the name of this person come out to say, and all of us are now saying, oh, this person has COVID-19. So when you're within the company, you have to think very seriously about the potential of maybe an employee being tested and perhaps coming out positive. How are you going to secure that data and make sure that you only use it maybe with the NCDC in Nigeria or the CDC of the country you're in, and really protect it, to protect that person and protect the company. In Nigeria now, we have the Nigerian data protection rules. Seplat, as a dual listed company, we're also subject to the UK data protection rules. So you really have to be careful to really design a framework that will help you deal with data. And on that note, Darren, I think I'll pause and give my colleagues an opportunity to also contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marian. You raised some interesting points. I think the issue of data is key, and you know, sometimes you find that unless we all collaborate, there would be issues. There are dependencies. So for example, if a GC is, you know, doing what they should do and the company does not release unnecessary information, we have a situation where if you're liaising with public officials, they might not follow the rules that we are following. So all these dependencies also matter. I think it's important that all sectors work together. I would move on to the next question whilst we build up on questions generally. So I'm moving on to the public sector because I would like to get a public sector perspective on most of these issues that Marian has actually introduced. And I'm going to Sharif Sam, our next panelist. From your role in the public sector, working in the Parliament of Kenya, what has changed in the sector and how have you adopted in these COVID-19 times?
Thank you very much, and thanks again, Cynthia, for organizing. This come together of legal counsel working in various institutions in Africa. In general, I think all of us, we appreciate in the public service, one of the greatest challenge we have had is adapting to the new normal. Many of the public institutions, I think, operate through meetings, physical meetings, but now because of the new normal, you have to meet from a distance visually. Everything you do virtual meetings. So I think technology is one of the new change which has come into the public service. I work in an institution, the House of Representative of the People, where members have to gather together to pass policies, to pass legislations, to do approvals of cabinet secretaries, appointment to public offices. We had to invest a lot in technology for us to undertake some of our programs. Members of Parliament have been meeting virtually from different locations because the government limited at least 15 people should gather together. The other change I think that we have noted is on communication, because generally in the public service, we operate under what is called confidentiality. There are documents which you are limited on circulation, but in the era where you are not able to physically move and maybe peruse and document, then now you have to build more trust on the other people, where you can have the documents now digitized. You share everything, internal memos, some of them which are confidential, in the hope that the other members are also able to keep that secrecy and also to operate within the norms. There's a lot of empathy also, and I think that is something I've noted, because many officers, especially in Kenya, were locked out of Nairobi. And you need to understand they are out of town with their families. They cannot travel to the city so that they can be close to the place of work. So a lot of it has also involved a lot of sacrifice, because those officers who are around have also embraced support for the others and also been able to engage through the virtual communication. The other one is government policies on how HR generally operates. I think generally in the world, especially for the public sector, for you to be counted to have attended work, you must log in and log out physically. But I think this new normal has changed the way we do our business. You can now log in when you are still in your house, and that is now accepted, although the government policies have not changed. For now, things have changed. You report to work from your house, you report to work maybe from the hotel, and you do your assignment from there. You even email them to colleagues, you share them online. And then the very fundamental, and I think for me, because I operate from the court corridors, is the way the courts have embraced technology going forward. Because the rights of individual and how they are to be protected has not stopped because of the coronavirus. People have been accessing justice. So the way the courts in Kenya embraced, especially filing of court cases and pleadings, and the way also courts embrace in Zoom for hearings, where you can file your document virtually from your desk, then the court can communicate to you, you even pay the court fees. I think for me that has reduced a lot in terms of even the labor that we engage people to clean offices, the people that it has also interfered with existing contracts, because now we don't need more people to come and clean offices, more people to carry documents to court, more people to go and prepare for hearings. All what you need now is access to internet, access to a scanner, then you can communicate with the judge. The judge can work virtually and also deliver a judgment, issue orders. So I think for me that going forward, especially for the public sector, it will have a big impact, because we were relying a lot on resources to build space, especially courtrooms, offices for conferences. So this is going to also impact on the budget for the public sector, because especially for the legal counsel, you may not need a huge budget now to even budget for offices. If we embrace what has been brought by coronavirus, then I think we can even work going forward. We can restructure our working hours so that rather than coming into the office in the morning, you even work in the afternoon, or you come and work later, even at night when you are still in your house. So I am grateful for especially my colleagues here in Kenya, and especially those whom we work together, for embracing technology, adopting to the new normal, and believing in one another. That in the public service, I think is a big plus, because the services have not stopped. We are still serving the public, although serving from far. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Sam. That's a point, and your final point was key. The services haven't stopped. We're still serving the public. We just need to be dynamic. I think if I speak about the Nigerian situation, I think there was some initial reluctance in our judiciary. However, as far as I know, they are now embracing the new normal, even though I have been informed that judgments still need to be read in courts, but we hope that there will be more changes around that. So I'll just go straight to the private sector, and I will call on Sheyi. How have you adapted to remote working as a GC? Have there been new solutions or innovations which you have utilized in this, your adaptation?
Thank you very much, Derry. And also want to thank ACGC for the opportunity to be a part of this panel and also to share experiences. So, well, for Jumia, I think it's been a unique experience in the sense that thankfully, because of the sector we are in, we've embraced technology. We try to, as much as possible, to embrace technology in all that we do. And of course, one area is also in terms of how we communicate, how we manage our contract processes, even in trainings. And now I think we're beginning to see now more than ever that it's very critical for all in-house counsels to try as much as possible to embrace technology. I think it's sort of like the situation of the 5, or should I say 10 virgins in the Bible, where you had 5 virgins prepared and 5 unprepared. And of course, for companies that had adopted technology before now, it was easy to navigate this COVID pandemic era, while for companies that before now had not really adopted technology, they're finding it a bit challenging. But I would say that for us, we've tried to, as much as possible, adapt technology in different areas. First of all, in how we communicate. Being a young startup company, we've depended a lot on technology in communication. We've also used technology a lot in how we manage our contracting process. For instance, we have tools that we use in managing the review of contracts, approvals, and even signing. So, of course, in this COVID era, it was possible to get lots of contracts signed without worrying about having to transport the physical documents from one location to the other, because we already had digital tools that we were using for such processes. And I think for us, as well, in my legal team, one decision we are taking a few months prior was also to try to use technology in how we conduct training for other team members within the company on related regulatory or even legal issues. We've, as much as possible, tried to use what we started doing actually was to create what I'll call whiteboard videos for trainings. Instead of having to do physical training, we started creating these whiteboard trainings to make it easy to actually have trainings conducted for members in all locations, because of course it was a bit challenging to have to, and time consuming as well, to have to carry out trainings in different locations and with different team members. So of course we had adopted technology by using, making training videos for different team members. So of course, in this era right now, it's possible to communicate trainings without worrying about not being in the same physical location. And I would say another thing we're also seeing is that right now we're seeing even regulators now embrace, technology and how we actually resolve issues. For instance, we deal a lot with regulators like the Consumer Protection Commission, the Standards Organization of Nigeria, and of course, right now we've had a few meetings with them on Zoom, engaging with people complaining about different issues, and we've actually been able to do this remotely. We didn't have to have physical meetings to get this done. So I think that right now technology is really very important, and of course, I know that when we talk about technology, a lot of people think about expensive technological tools. The truth is that there are lots of cheap or even free tools that can be used. For instance, Zoom we're using right now is actually a free tool. And of course, I know lots of companies already previously had invested so much in video conferencing tools. But right now, what's basically survived the test of time is actually solutions like Zoom, which is available for free, even though there are, of course, subscription models, there are subscription options as well, but really there are lots of free tools that can be used. We don't have to go, or free or cheap tools that can be used. We don't have to go for the most expensive tools. And of course, even with regards to how we manage compliance tools, there are also technological tools as well. There are lots of technological tools in the market. So the reality is that it's very possible for a lot of work to be done remotely. We don't have to be physically present to actually get a lot of our work done. That's what we're seeing. And of course, I believe that even in terms of how our teammates require, a lot of times they sort of require the physical presence of lawyers to deal with some certain challenges or even to join meetings. But right now, there's sort of like a change of mindset, because there's the need to actually, for the legal counsel to provide advice remotely and not necessarily to be physically there to resolve issues. But right now, people are more open to having issues resolved remotely. I believe that's what we're experiencing.
Thank you so much, Sheyi. That was interesting. I think what I picked from what you've said is the fact that we all need to have, or we all need to be prepared, because for those who were prepared, it was like a very easy transition. Whilst people went into panic mode, having to invest in infrastructure to enable working from home. So that's interesting, and it's good to know. I see that some of the results have come in on the poll. So I'll just share this with everyone. So the results are quite interesting. The first question we had was, how have you and your in-house legal colleagues adapted to working during the pandemic? And 41% of people said very easily, we always had systems in place. 41% also said fairly straightforward. And we have no nightmares, but 17% some difficulties. So that's good. I think it shows that corporate counsel working in places that have kept their fingers on the pulse. The second question is, given the choice, how much time would you like to see the in-house function working remotely? And I have 10% results saying 100% of the time. But the bulk of the results states 69% that they would like to work at least 2 days a week. And I think this is key for employers to note. I had a discussion with one of my colleagues, and she told me in no uncertain terms that she's even keen to resign if she does not get flexi working hours sorted post-COVID-19. So I think that employers need to understand that these are the trends going forward, and we need to stay in line with the realities. So thank you for your words, Sheyi. That was very, very useful. I'll just move on to Bidemi. And the question I have for you, Bidemi, is, do you foresee an increased consolidation of roles in respect of GCs? I know that you already double hat as both company secretary and head of legal. And will this be the new normal going forward? Is this ideal? What are the pain points?
Thanks, Darren, and thanks to ACGC for inviting me. Definitely, Darren, you know, we're in unusual times. It's called VUCA, you know, where everything is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think that for me, I'll start with first asking the question, is it ideal? You know, ideal is not necessarily the reality, and I am a realist. You know, we always know what the ideal situation is, but I face my realities and I try to navigate within that. And that would be my advice to GCs that are my, you know, as colleagues as well, to say things have definitely changed, and they're not going to go back to where we were post-COVID-19. So definitely employers will make tough calls, you know, to ensure business continuity, to make sure that they're able to keep their heads above the water. And if it means consolidation of roles, so be it. I'm not sure we have control over that. And I also typically tend to, you know, focus on what I have control over as well. So definitely there will be consolidation of roles. It's already happening. People have consolidated. We've also separated at different times, depending on, you know, what the organization is trying to do. So that's my first take. But are GCs prepared is the question that we should be, in our minds, weighing and trying to make sure that we're prepared for it. I believe that, we're in a, if you're a business lawyer, you have to also see yourself not just as a strictly professional legal person, but also a business manager. You have to understand your business from end to end so that you can advise appropriately, and make sure that your advice is adding value. So I believe that in some way we are prepared. Do we need to take some more steps to make sure that we're positioned for it? Absolutely, yes. Why do I say we're prepared? I believe that we, by virtue of our trainings, we have some basic skills that we can, some of them are latent and we're not really doing anything with it. But some of them we've exhibited, but strictly on legal matters, problem solving skills, for instance, communication skills, analytical skills, being able to, identify and manage risks. Those are skills that I believe that you can definitely extend to whatever else, the business asks you to do. And I think it's a good challenge. When the organization comes to you and says that we're consolidating roles, we want you to take on more responsibilities, rather than saying, oh, I'm going to do more for less. I think, the better approach to it is to take it on, do it perfectly well, and then you can definitely then ask, to be compensated for it because you've delivered value. So I would say that very, very, very important for us to see it that way. And for me, consolidation is not necessarily a negative thing. It would happen at different times of the organization for different reasons. I think that sometimes it makes you a one-stop shop for everything legal and compliance, and and sometimes the business also, they do not want to keep going to different functions or different departments, to be able to solve their legal issues. So when they're able to for compliance matters, ethics and compliance, they're able to come to you for things around communications. How do we communicate externally? Because even where we are now, most of those things come to us to vet anyhow. So you still have inputs that you provide into all of those areas that are not strictly legal areas, but they are coming our way gradually. I think that, the best approach to it is to be open and to use it as an opportunity to strengthen the skills you already have, exhibit the latent skills that you're not necessarily, demonstrating in your strictly legal role, and then to build up more skills. Because at the end of the day, some of us, after being GCs, will do different things. I know lawyers that have gone on to become so many other things apart from just being lawyers, So I don't believe that any opportunity or any experience will be wasted. And I think that we should actually be driving it rather than waiting to come to us, can we do more? We should be asking to take on more. It might mean having, more people to report to us and having to delegate to and all of that. I would not say that the consolidation is necessarily a negative thing. I think I will see it in very positive light.
Thank you, Amy. That actually really helps. I see the context. We've also got the results of the polls, and 70% of our participants believe that there will be an increased consolidation of roles. I mean, I can share a little perspective from my end. I think what's key is that we, balance it right. In my function, I actually handle the compliance function. And if there isn't the right balance, I have had situations where I would need to conduct monitoring on the legal function, and I'm also the head of legal function. So, how are you a judge in your own cause? But the point is, I think just the right balance would help. I've even heard of people, I know someone who handles legal, compliance, and HR, and is also company secretary. So I think just the right balance would help. So I'll just move on to the next question. And this is on our external counsel, our relationships with external counsel, and it's to Marian. My question is, have external lawyers adopted the right approach pandemic, how will your experience in COVID-19 change the way you work with external counsel?
Thank you very much, Darren. What I would say is some external counsel have thrived, some haven't. And when I look at it critically, it depends on how prepared they were themselves. So I'll give you instances.
Mary,
at the moment, because of COVID, am I mute? No, I'm not. Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you. I can hear.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay, great. All right. So it's really varied between the approach of the law firms. Are you being proactive? Are you being reactive and sitting back? So the COVID-19 situation means that there are more discussion points. General counsel, the legal team, we're kind of fighting fires. Our business colleagues are looking to us to help them with the evolving priorities, the evolving risks. And so there are more gaps to discuss. However, while the company is busy fighting, there are some law firms that realize that they have to be proactive and engage internal in-house counsel and offer their services, whether it's by having webinars or sending you newsletters, so that you are aware that they know what they're talking about under those circumstances. And so while you're there trying to fight your fires, it's very easy to call on that law firm that has sent you the newsletter talking about those same challenges that you're dealing with. Or perhaps you went on to a webinar and they were talking about those issues that you're dealing with. Unfortunately, we have panel law firms in London, we have in Lagos, and then we have in the base office where we have activity. Practically all the law firms on our London panel did this. They sent us invitation for webinars, they sent us newsletters, they sent updates, they reached out to engage. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, it was only one law firm that did that, constantly sending us newsletters, constantly inviting us for webinars. And indeed, when we had those issues, guess who members of my team wanted to talk to? They had individuals, names of individuals who wrote the articles in the newsletters or who spoke during those webinars that they went to. And again, I found that some of those law firms, the ones that had digitalized their services, were better prepared to reach out and work with us in our own virtual world. And so I think those that have reached out, being proactive, have thrived more. So they've gotten more briefs, while those sitting back, waiting for us to, come the usual way, you have problems, you come to them, or you do an RFP. Those ones I think haven't thrived as much. So what I would say is for a company like mine, the proactivity of the law firm is key. And the sending the information is the only thing that tells us that they understand what we're going through. In-house, we were very busy. We were flat out working. So anybody reaching out to say, I can help. Let me do this with you, or let me do this for you. I can make your life better. I can help you set up your risk intelligence framework in a better way to manage this COVID. And I will help you develop the legal ecosystem that you can roll out post-COVID. Those law firms have been the ones that we've worked better with. And in the court system, for instance, they were also affected by COVID. And we had dates being delayed, we wanted to do things. And some law firms where the attitude was, okay, we'll have to wait, what can we do? They weren't willing to come out with alternative ways of solving those problems, albeit commercial ways. But it was more like, okay, let's wait. The admin judge hasn't done that, because of COVID, nothing is happening. And so the firms that have come forth and said, albeit that we're on lockdown and this is happening, this actually gives us an opportunity to come out with creative ways to solve these problems instead of the traditional ways. And so brainstorming, whether it's on Zoom or Teams, to come up with creative solutions that would help us solve our problems was actually very good. Unfortunately, not a lot of the law firms in Nigeria did that for us, and that's been our experience. And so if I'm going to leave a word with external counsel, it's to be more proactive, get on the digitalization bandwagon, and get creative, use newsletters, use webinars, use different tools to actually tell the in-house counsel that you understand what they're going through and you're there to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have also observed especially on LinkedIn, that there's been so much discussions being shared freely by external counsel, sometimes teasers with a view to maybe getting work, but that's also been impressive. I have the poll results which have come in, which says that GCs have been 63% somewhat satisfied with the approach adopted by external legal advisors in supporting us through the pandemic. I think I would leave with the point which you made, is for external counsel to be proactive. It's important to stay dynamic and just be ready, basically. So thanks for your comments, Miriam. I'll go to the next question, and I'm addressing this to Naomi. There has been a lot of discussion about a decline of the old sector and a rise of the new sectors post-COVID-19 or within these COVID-19 times, and which has been accelerated by the pandemic. What is your view on this, and what we should be thinking about?
Thank you, Darren. So it's interesting because we've definitely seen the pendulum swing from one end to the other. Whether or not there will be an ongoing impact, I believe will depend on the sector in question, consumer demand, and also the response of businesses during this period. And of course, policy changes. You know, regulators will always have an impact on how effective these changes are. So, I mean, fintech is a good example of how the pandemic has accelerated growth. There have been, mobile money transactions in Rwanda increased fivefold during the lockdown, and Paga saw a 330% jump in customers signing up to use their wallet service. So, with most people stuck at home, naturally, they would turn to digital payments to pay for bills, internet, food, look to Jumia Pay or Supermart, order things online, and, just try and avoid cash transactions altogether, given the nature of the virus. In Nigeria, the pandemic coupled with the devaluation of the Naira led a lot of people, a lot of millennials, to wonder how can they actually save their money if they're earning Naira? How can they invest their money? The wealth management platforms such as PiggyVest, were the answer to, for a lot of millennials. So PiggyVest's leadership mentioned that they were initially really worried about the pandemic, and they were worried it would trigger a rush, with customers just clearing out their savings on their platform. But what they actually saw was people doubling down on investments to try and earn more money in a safe way. So, that's one side of how it's how the pandemic has accelerated growth. But it's not the case across the board. With payment gateways, they may have experienced a dip in revenue depending on how diverse their client portfolio is. So if they have key customers that are in aviation, hospitality, or like ride-hailing apps, there would definitely have been fewer transactions during the lockdown period. So I know with Paystack, for instance, we tried to get through the period by offering more value-added services and just pushing a lot more content to users that have been beneficial, that would be beneficial to our business. We would see, like we've seen a lot of instances where we've tried to rely more heavily on our partners, such as banks, to try and expand our products and services. So, how can we be more involved in payments from end to end? Can we look into card issuing or POS terminals? And I do believe that with the social media age, that you're more likely to gain more fans, and consumers will pick up on this effort to improve and to innovate rather than remaining stagnant during this period. So on the legal side of things, we could definitely do a lot more to support business operations and like product teams to make sure that however innovative they want to be, or however creative they want to try and be during this period, we're helping them establish those partnerships. We're helping them draw up the contracts that they need, get the relevant regulatory approvals on time, like if needed. But it's like I mentioned, policy as well has also had a pretty significant impact. In Kaduna and Ekiti, I was quite happy to see that the government's waived right-of-way taxes that would have to be paid to the government for telco infrastructure. So the objective was to provide more people with access to affordable data. I genuinely believe that the effect of this will outlast the crisis, if it's executed effectively. In Rwanda, just before the lockdown, their central bank told telcos to eliminate charges on all mobile money transfers for 3 months. So this was great news for customers. So they saw a spike in transaction volumes. That went up significantly. But for operators, they wouldn't necessarily see that translate into profits. So by reducing charges, sometimes that would eliminate the opportunity to make money for operators. So I think things like that will definitely be a temporary effect until charges are reinstated. But I think overall, some of these effects will be temporary, but habits are definitely being formed by consumers that I know will outlast the crisis, especially if they've had no choice but to learn to trust more online services, rely more on a convenient or easier way to do things through digital payments. So if they enjoyed that process, if the user interface was good enough and reliable enough to pique their interest and to retain that customer, I believe that they will probably still continue. They'll continue in the habits that they've learned during this period, even after the lockdown. So yeah, if convenience and reliability is something to look at, we can definitely say that the increase in these new sectors and the utilization of these new sectors will probably carry on until after COVID. So it's not simply about the pandemic. I think the pandemic has provided an opportunity for a lot of people to look to these solutions and to look at these products to solve their problems easily. But long term, if the products were easy and convenient to use, then they're more likely to carry on with them. Yeah.
Thank you, Naomi. In fact, you made a point that I've really observed, that COVID-19 almost gave some technological solutions validation, in the sense that when we weren't sure, or what we weren't sure would be successful, now is more the norm. So you do have a point, and I must highlight the point you made, that consumer habits will probably have a lasting effect post the pandemic. So in a sense, to stay relevant, it's good to keep your eye on the pulse and monitor what the consumers want and what they require. So thanks for your points. I will move to another topic, which is more on market perspectives. But before I do that, we have the results of the poll, which is quite interesting. Do you agree with market predictions that the current crisis marks the farewell to the old economy of oil and banking stocks and the rise of a new tech-focused one? And 65% of participants agree, 35% disagree. And then in terms of the new sectors, I would share what the leanings are. Which of the following new sectors do you believe will be able to capitalize most on the pandemic? And digital payments is at 89%. And even though, the next sector is healthcare, but that's at 38%. So I can see where the trends are going. And of course, technology and cloud computing. So I guess we're all aligned. Our participants, thank you for your interaction. Please keep the results coming in and from the polls. So I'll just move to Shea. I have a question for you. Is it all doom and gloom for Africa economically? Because there was so much in the press. I wish to highlight the McKinsey report on tackling COVID-19, which predicts that Africa's GDP growth would reduce significantly. Can you share your views with us?
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Darren, and thanks to Cynthia and Larry and Nakunda for the opportunity and for the my colleagues and the discussions of having so enthralled with the discussions, so I've been taking notes. On the market perspective, it was a viewpoint from McKinsey, which came out in April, and essentially they were saying, look, we have not, this is just early days, and this is what we think. So to first answer you, I definitely do not agree that it's all doom and gloom. And more importantly, even with the events that have happened since then, we all can see that definitely it's not all doom, it's not all gloom. As a matter of fact, the level of resilience has been quite interesting and impressive. You know, and I mean, when they brought out the report, I like the report was saying, look, this is early days. There are about 4 or 5 scenarios which we think that if they happen, these are the implications. And so it was a worst case scenario that could come to 8% loss from 3.2 to minus. But what we have seen so far is the fact that even across the world, and which is understandable, is the fact that at the time that people were writing and making comments and reaching conclusions, there wasn't enough. Nobody had explained what had happened before. And so it was a question of largely conjecture. But what we have seen since the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdowns across the world, not just in Africa, is the fact, the opportunities that have, instead of just the negatives, that actually created opportunities and increased the perspectives and the breadth of options open to businesses, to governments, and generally how business is done. So from the market perspective, we have seen as a matter of fact that those projections have not been entirely on course. And they themselves, and I would recommend that the reopening and reimagining Africa, they brought out the subsequent report in May, which was showing the projections to see the development and the actuals compared to what they had envisaged. But in fairness to McKinsey, they did project various scenarios where they said, look, if these things happen, it will mitigate these protections. And we have seen that a lot of them are happening. For example, issues about liquidity and fiscal capacity, the issue of managing the informal economy and providing support for those who are the lower rungs of the economic value chain. And we have seen that in real terms in Lagos State, in some of the other countries too, with real government, and also in large cooperation with the private sector, providing mitigants. And it's, I will say that one of the things about this pandemic is really brought out the humanity of man, and shifted our focus from being so self-centered to see how we can work together. It's amazing. Like in Nigeria, we also what the private sector had done, providing isolation centers across the country, providing funds to support everything. And then some of the governments with private sector sending money to the lower end of the people. And so we see that as a matter of fact, those projections gladly, I must say gladly, have not come to pass. Just as the way they said, look, and you know, like the one about, oh, Africa, there will be dead bodies across the streets. Now, if you looked at the way it was there, with all the established economies, with the first-class health sectors being overwhelmed, on the face of it, it was like, man, if this thing were to happen this way, Africa would little or no healthcare system will just be overwhelmed. But in the reality is that that has not happened. And I must say that one of the things that this portends and supports is the resilience of the African economy and the African spirit. A lot of what we're seeing today is the product of that resilience. The manner in which we adapted to working under the logjam, the way we work, like for example, I'm sure some of our colleagues are going to talk about it, the way annual general meetings were held with via proxy, without all the, in spite of all of the challenges, were quite encouraging. And so we look forward with expectation, with hope that the way we're going, there will be improvement. Of course, with they did point out the issues of lower oil prices and everything, and we see the impact on the economies in Nigeria. Of course, terrorism on South Africa, on Kenya, but we see a gradual reopening. And what they have said in the new report in May is what I will recommend, which is that, look, as much as this pandemic has happened, maybe it's an opportunity for us to reset, to review how we approach, and the opportunity to redeem some of the things that have happened. And so I will say it's not all doom and gloom for Africa economically, and the fact that the expected level of drop in the growth rates and GDP is not going to happen. Oh, are there challenges? So there are, but at the same time, the government, in cooperation with the private sector, are taking the right steps to mitigate. Of course, the jury is still out. We need to see how it further goes, but I will say that there is not all doom and gloom. On the contrary, it's been a pleasant surprise to the impact on the African economics. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheye. That was very useful. And I'm going to discuss the poll results with everyone. We've had quite an interesting response. So in response to the question that is it all doom and gloom, and would Africa's GDP growth reduce by 3 to 8 percentage points? 53% of our participants say it depends on the sector or industry. 8% completely agree. 18% somewhat agree. 13% say too early to say. I lean towards it's too early to say. However, I think it's important for us to note that we can't have a prescriptive approach to dealing with COVID-19. We need to look into our local realities. I saw in the news recently that, was it Korea or South Korea, that there was no lockdown imposed at all. All they did was wear their masks, and somehow they were able to flatten the curve and reduce, the infection rates. So I think it's just for everyone to realize what needs to be done in their own clients. So I'll just go to the next question, and this is for Bidemi. And just a moment, please. So yes, Bidemi, as a leader, as a general counsel, would you say that GC's role is increasingly expanding beyond strictly legal and compliance matters and more around helping to navigate risks and opportunities?
I think it's very obvious that at this time we will have to wear many hats. Most organizations, so if I take my organization for example, when at the wake of the pandemic, we adopted a one company approach. So you are not even allowed to just be talking about your function or what you do. We all are set behind one corporate objective, which is for business continuity at this particular time. So you definitely have to do much more than just adding value from the point of view of a legal person into the discussions or into what is being done. And obviously, somebody, I think it was Marian that talked about data protection and data privacy issues, was the first thing that came up in terms of, how do you treat employees that test positive for the COVID? What are we going to do? So throughout all the actions that we're taking, we were involved as legal, providing inputs, helping to draft communication, consent forms, because obviously when you get personal information, especially the sensitive ones, if you want to know whether someone has an underlying medical condition, so you know exactly how to approach whether this sort of person can't even show up in the factories at all, then the legal, the legal person has to not only wear the hat of the GC, but as a business, how do we protect the employees' data, and how do we protect, the company as well from any legal risk in terms of how the data is managed? Competition law issues around pricing. How do you price the goods and services that you provide, so that you don't fall foul of the guidelines of the Competition Law and Consumer Protection Commission, So all of those things across the value chain or even the supply chain of the organization, you find out that you have to provide inputs, and you cannot just be wearing the legal hat at that point. You have to help to identify the risks that are likely to come to the organization, and then help to also provide creative solutions, innovative solutions on how you navigate those risks. Shaya had mentioned about, advising the board as well. So one of the things that came up was how were companies going to hold their annual general meetings, because it was year end for most organizations and they must hold the annual general meetings. So company secretaries came together advising the board, and that I had to do as well, because then the board would turn to you and say, what can we do? So all the guidelines that came from regulators, and I must say here that our regulators were quite proactive, and they also listened, because there was a particular regulator that came up with a guideline that, we're able to hold the AGM by proxy, but you cannot, for instance, have discuss special business. And there's some special businesses that you have to discuss at your AGM, or else you are going to have 2 AGMs in the year. Why would you want to do that? The uncertainty of the COVID-19 is such that you don't even know when things are going to be back to normal, and you're able to have the mass AGMs that we normally have. And then the cost implications of having multiple general meetings. So we came together, had a conversation, and the regulator listened, and of course, so your role, that's like an advocacy role now at this point, where you are trying to get the best outcome for your organization to help navigate what's happening. So definitely the hat you must wear must go beyond just being a lawyer. It's a leadership hat. And when you're a leader, everything rises and falls on the leader. The leader doesn't say, oh, sorry, I'm not in supply chain, so I can't answer this question. Doesn't say I'm not in marketing, so sorry, I don't know anything about it. You have to forge the way ahead. You have to determine how the solution would be, the best solution that will enable the organization to reach its objectives. So certainly, it would continue to expand. More would be required of us. And what is gratifying is that, as counsel, legal counsel, we have what it takes. When we reach in, we find out that we're able to, when the opportunity comes to our table and we're asked these questions that are not strictly legal, don't say, sorry, I can't answer that. Think about it. If you need some time to sort of understand what the issues are, talk to colleagues, because networking at this point is also extremely critical. You're chatting with your colleagues and trying to understand what they are doing, of course, under the constraints of maintaining all the confidentiality and everything. Then you come back to the organization with a solution. They see you differently, because it's a leadership moment for us. It's not a functional or a legal moment. It's a leadership moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bidemi. I agree with you. We should see ourselves as part of the business and business leaders. I'm just going to share a result of the poll. In this one, the question is, do you think this exceptional year is going to cement or erode the importance of in-house legal within the business? And 41%, in fact, it's a tie. 41% believe that there will be some increased recognition for the work of in-house legal, whilst another 41% believes that there will be significant change as businesses recognize the strategic value of in-house counsel in navigating them through the pandemic. I mean, I appreciate that our audience is general counsel, so we may actually be leaning towards these answers, but this is an impressive result, and it's key that we ensure that we remain business leaders. I'm just going to move straight to Miriam. The next question I have for you is, what should general counsels be doing to enable the navigation of post-COVID-19 recovery?
Thank you very much, Darren. I think that actually leads very well from the comments Bidemi made about the role of the general counsel during the pandemic. And so looking forward, I'll talk about this in 3 pillars. One is that general counsels and legal departments need to be thinking about the legal department's value proposition and their operating model. And I'll talk more about that. And then the second one is their contribution to the business strategy. That really speaks to what Bidemi was talking about. And then leveraging the digital acceleration that we have found. There's no escaping it. And so when you talk about rethinking the legal functions value proposition, I think we need to do a diagnostic test. What do I mean? You need to reevaluate how we as GCs and legal departments can support our businesses in this new normal. So you need to identify the demands, the challenges, the opportunities that we face. What's the business case for change? And you can't do that without thinking about your aspiration for your legal function. What's your unique selling proposition for your business? What are the lessons that you're learning now? The lessons that you're going to capture and embed in the short term, medium term, and long term. And the general counsel, I think, is in a very unique position because you have an enterprise-wide perspective. So because of the advice we give, we know about the entire gamut of the business. So you can very significantly contribute to the risk intelligence framework, okay? So then you would say, okay, what's the new legal operating model for GCs? And so I would use the, respond, recover, then transform in order to thrive. And I think one way or the other, all of us are already doing this and doing it very well and supporting our businesses to do that. So you need to perhaps be reviewing your legal strategy too, because your legal strategy is really a tactical approach or a tactical response to the needs of your stakeholders. In this case, perhaps the company is your primary stakeholder, but there are also stakeholders. It could be the regulators if you're in a compliance role like I am too. And then, so you need to be asking those questions. Has the business changed? Have the priorities changed? And if they have, then what is legal's role in meeting that? So in other words, you may have to modify your own strategy so that you can align with the developing business strategy. And so how do you do that? What are the behaviors you're going to bring to the table to really react and respond proactively to the business strategy? One, I would say, is knowledge management. We need a very robust approach to knowledge management. How do you keep team members up to date, especially in this virtual world? How do you enable them to learn from the relevant external providers? So for instance, yes, there are webinars all over the place. There's something now called Death by Webinar, but I've found that a lot of people who are doing these webinars are kind of talking about things they think are relevant to you. And by the time you hear those over and over, you're sick and tired of it. So you need to also then look at, okay, what are the problems that we have? What's the business strategy? What are the key things that members of the legal team need to know? Like Bidemi said, a lot of it is business knowledge, commercial knowledge, finance knowledge, so that lawyers who ordinarily run away from numbers are being forced to learn about EBITDA, P&L, all sorts of things. So you need to come in there to enable a learning environment, use technology. What's your regulatory database? Again, you stand a risk of falling foul of regulatory rules. So you need to automate how you deal with these things. How do you inspire efficiency in your team? How do you minimize legal risk and mitigate it? How do you keep your workforce connected, for instance, in this virtual world? And if you have any new member of your team coming in when you're in this sort of lockdown virtual world, how do you get that person to be connected? How do you engage the regulators? How do you handle performance-related issues in this sort of world? So you have to continue thinking, respond, recover, and then how do you transform? But particularly, I'd like to focus on leveraging the digital acceleration. In an industry like mine, we have to really support the supply chain, our supply chain colleagues in their digitalizing the contracting process. And what do I mean by that? While we've been on lockdown, a lot of the paper that we used to move while we were in the office suddenly disappeared. What happened to them? We started signing documents using e-signatures. And to be honest with you, some of the executive directors were a bit worried about that. How do you ensure that somebody is not going to take my signature and then use it for fraud? How do you ensure that the vendor is not going to come back and say, actually, this is not the right signature? So we had to start thinking about e-signatures and working with SCM department, IT, and leading and guiding them to the principles that they had to think about when they were doing that. How do you integrate the use of technology for tendering? So e-tendering. I'm in an industry where you have to tender for everything. What of document retention during these times? How do you ultimately minimize the time and resources you need in a period where you're having to do more, you're having to advise and hold hands more, but you're not expected to increase your cost or increase your headcount? If anything, we were told to reduce our cost, and we had to reopen contracts to do that. And what will help you to do this? We need to leverage broader technology. We need to start thinking about digitizing our own legal services. So for instance, my team, we have something we call the legal ecosystem, and we're actually automating most of our legal services that we need to, whether it's compliance, contract management, land acquisition management, case management, but really to automate, to save time, be more efficient, save resources. Also, you need to look at how you're going to deal with the increasing complexity, the increasing volume, the increasing pace of the business. How do you deliver the data and analysis you need in this sort of environment? But really, what is underlying everything is that the general counsel and the legal department really need to secure a place at the table before, and I emphasize before, rather than after strategies are formulated and decisions made. So legal now has to be integrated into that decision-making process. We're no longer just lawyers focusing on the law and documents and contracts. We need to start seeing ourselves as business lawyers, people that our business colleagues actually want to invite to the table because they see that we're enablers. We're going to help them achieve their corporate objectives and also then help them minimize the erosion of those benefits that they've gained by delivering the corporate objectives. So the relationships with our business colleagues, collaboration with them, and then a deeper due diligence for some of the initiatives where their counterparties, third-party counterparties, have become very central. So we need to, like I said, leverage their digitalization to try and sort out all these and still deliver to our businesses as an integral part of the business. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I learned so much there, and I'm even taking tips that I'm taking to my in-house team. I mean, I love the words respond, recover, transform, and thrive. The point is, what you've said, which provided much clarity, is if you don't have a strategy around your value proposition, it's difficult to even show it in this. So I really get that, and it's important that GCs really just ensure that they deliver value wherever they work. And the final one, which I'm going to discuss today, and I'm just going to mention to all our participants, we're going to go into a Q&A session. please keep the questions coming in. We will deal with all your questions. I can see that some questions are being answered. That is fine. Keep it interactive. So at Naomi, what areas of digitization should a GC be prioritizing now?
Oh gosh, I think I would just be reiterating a lot of what Marianne has said. Like the admin work has been a complete nightmare during this period, especially when dealing with banks and regulators. I'm sorry, they want hard copies of everything. The original has to be signed, and how are we going to get it printed out? How are we going to get are we going to go to each director's house, to get it signed? Do they even have a printer at home? Once we have it, are we going to get it couriered? So figuring out all those logistics has not been easy. So I would strongly encourage just investing in more tools and signing up for platforms that allow subscriptions to make these processes easier. It can be difficult if we want it to be, but there's a way to use tools that allow everyone to sign using their electronic signature. Their online contract management systems, and utilizing Zoom, for instance, for a lot more virtual meetings. And I think in my experience, the Bank of Ghana has done, they've done an excellent job. They've been a really good example of how, to really utilize digitization during this period. I don't feel like they've really missed a beat. They've continued to organize workshops online. They recently issued a PSP license, and that was announced after the lockdown. So there's a need to encourage more collaboration to move online. It doesn't have to be stagnant. It doesn't have to ground to a halt. And I think also on the legal side of things, with everything moving online, to servers and to drives, there's a need for us to understand how data is moving through the company, especially personal data. So something that we've done recently at Paystack is we got the entire company to complete a register of processing activities. So literally every single instance or every single point of collection or data processing that takes place in the company is now recorded, so that we can see how this flows through our system. We can see, end to end, who has access to it, who controls that data, how it's even being secured. And, I think we're moving past an age where this is best practice. If you look at the general data protection regulations in the EU or the Nigerian data protection regulations now, these activities are actually required. We have to be aware of how data is, what the data flow is through our entire system, and how best we can protect it. What are the internal and external controls that we should be putting in place to protect it.
Thank you so much, Naomi. That was pretty useful. So we've actually come to the end of the first part of this discussion, and I think we've had a meaningful discussion. Thank you so much to every single discussant. We're going straight into the Q&A, and I see that we have quite a number of questions, and I'm just going to take the first point. Just a moment. We will take the Q&A now. I will jump to okay, so I have a question or a comment from Irene Robinson Ayonwale. It goes, I hope people have done proper research on contracts which by Nigerian law cannot have e-signatures. So this is a question that our panelists would take on Nigerian law. So basically, the question is just asking, are we allowed to sign via e-signatures? Have we done our research? Should we be signing via e-signatures? I wish to throw this question at Bidemi Ademola. Do you have any insights on this?
Actually just dropped my response to it to say, yeah, I believe that Irene had a valid point. But the truth of the matter is that a significant number of the contracts that we need for our daily operations are allowed to be executed by e-signatures. And I think that we can take advantage of those. So documents like deeds, we do that, we have them, but they're, you know, far and in between in terms of day-to-day operations. So I think that we have the opportunity that we can leverage. Certainly where the restriction ends, we should comply with what the law says. So that would be my answer to Irene.
Thank you, Bidemi. I have another question. I'm not going in a particular order, just so we don't have too much of a time lag. It's a question from Gloria Iregbunam, and I think it's quite useful. And this is also for Nigerian GCs. Is anyone having challenges with the Corporate Affairs Commission rejecting scanned signatures and still insisting on wet ink signatures, even during this time? And so even though it's been answered, because I can see that one of our panelists has had this issue, my question now is, how do we consult with the CAC with a view to them being a bit dynamic? Because we are in an interesting time and we need to enable this being, you know, the order of the day. I would throw this question at Shea, please. Do you have any views on how we can navigate this?
Yeah, yes, it's to recognize that the CAC has really been quite engaging, and they have really been moving in line with the developments, and they've done a lot, but there's still room for improvement. And one of the things we can do in this is engagement, and getting them to understand that with the development in cybersecurity and technology, there are various ways by which you can confirm email signatures, and you're using two-factor confirmation to get. So there are ways that they can, because the affair is that anybody could manage, and I mean, you can just copy, and we know that it's possible. All you need to do is to have had the signature once and just carry it over onto a document. So it's really engagement. It's engagement that while they have done so much, there's also need to understand that there are various developments and they also should come up. So there's an issue that like we have had, or some of our customers have had. That's why I responded to Irene, that is true. But as much as they have done, and we must commend that, there's still so much more that they can do. Because we need to come to that place where the whole CAC process is digital, is digitized, as we have in other countries and everything, so that you don't even need to go in and going physically. But while they have done some, I mean, they've made, quite significant strides, they are definitely able to do so much more, particularly in this area. And those fears that they have, they're genuine, but they can also be mitigated. So it's a question of engagement, opening them up to the possibilities, and possibly if they have issues. It's one of the things I believe is, for us as stakeholders, as a private sector, if they come up and say, this is what the issue is, and these are the kind of, I'm sure we can work out ways to support their bringing such systems online, because it makes our life easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a question I'm looking at. It's not quite a question, it's a comment, but I think it's worth discussing. It's from Florence Nwabweze, which says, many thanks to our panelists for pointing out the risks inherent in data processing. I believe it was Marian that pointed that out. It is now more than ever important for companies to develop the appropriate framework and protective infrastructure to regulate how they protect personal data in their custody. Interestingly, despite the effects of the COVID-19, regulators are still holding companies responsible for any lapses in their data breaches. So basically, I understand this issue, and I would just advise that we just need to consult with the regulator and find a way for them to be a little more flexible, because indeed, if we're limited in ensuring adherence, we cannot be in a position where we're being penalized for data breaches. So thank you. I would also enjoin the participants to keep sending in their questions. I'm going through and I will see if there's another one that can be answered. Okay, so I have a question from Dagnachu Gerby, which says our law also allows for proxies, but there's no detailed guideline prepared by regulatory to apply. How can I get a guideline for further reference? I don't know if this is in Nigeria or, but I think I would leave that for now.
It's outside Nigeria.
Yes. Okay.
Earlier that if you check the Nigerian CAC website, and they can use the guidance as a basis for engaging their regulators. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, what I will do is, pending when we get more questions, I will just discuss a few highlights from what we've discussed thus far, and we'll take it from there. It has been quite an interesting discussion, and there are a few things that jumped at me. The first was we need to face our current realities, and by being adaptable, there will be consolidation of roles. There's also the points that Marian made earlier. Respond, recover, transform, thrive. Basically, General Counsel needs to reassess our value proposition and our strategy and clarify what our unique selling proposition is. This way it would enable us to work together to add value. The third one is that we are evolving from being just a support function. We need to be good business managers, and that way we would add value also. We also enjoin our external counsel to be proactive and creative to support GCs in their advisory. The fourth point I have here is to ensure relevance post-COVID-19. The sectors, we need to keep up with consumer habits. That will keep your eye on the pulse in what the emerging trends and customer habits are and guide us in our responses for the future. Fifthly, collaboration is key. It was nice to have listened to the fact that the private sector had properly collaborated with the public sector and in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is in reference to, I can speak for Nigeria, and the resilience of the African spirit. And finally, General Counsel are business leaders, not just back office support staff. So we should continue to do that. I would also just want to see if I have any comments from any of the discussants before we go into further Q&A and then we wrap up. Should I start with Sheyi? Do you have any closing remarks?
Okay, yes, I think one thing that will be important to actually emphasize, I think for a lot of us in-house counsel is the need to, should I say, engage, should I say, involved with a lot of stakeholder bodies, because I found during the pandemic, there were lots of challenges we faced as a business. And in order to engage with regulators, it was always easier to engage through these stakeholder bodies. I think that's one thing that a lot of us haven't, maybe before now, we didn't take very seriously. But post-COVID, well, we, a few years ago, started trying to be more serious, but I think during the COVID pandemic, it became very critical to actually be members of relevant stakeholder bodies and be able to engage with the government through these stakeholder bodies. I think maybe that's just one important information.
Thank you, Sheyi. So I will just go straight to Bidemi. Do you have any closing remarks? Bidemi, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, I think there was a time lag. So do you have any closing remarks ahead of, based on what we've discussed?
I think for me, it's just to emphasize the fact that, we're living in unprecedented times. We should never let the crisis go to waste. Today, we've identified opportunities that we can leverage on during the pandemic and post the pandemic. And technology has come out very clearly, the need for us to embrace technology, automation. And I think that before we start to hold our regulators accountable, we should look in-house ourselves as, counsel in private sector and the public sector, to ask ourselves, how much of automation are we also doing? How much are we investing in, technology skills, to the skills itself, and then the tools to help us, navigate through, and then we can then go to our regulators and ask for more. I believe that that's, the approach we should take. Start from our end, and then, definitely engage the regulators. And I think that as we all collaborate, we'll forge a way forward, and we'll look back at the crisis, and rather than say it was a crisis, we'll say it was good for us, because we've taken out a lot of positives and things that have stayed with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, BME. I would also like to get closing remarks from Marianne.
Thank you, Darren. Closing remarks, I'll just emphasize a few things. One is keep close to the business, align yourself to the business, and always wear the hat of enabling a legal ecosystem within which to deliver the corporate objectives. Also, I think we should all raise our risk intelligence quotient. So develop a framework for identifying risk, assessing it, and bringing our mitigation actions that will help us manage that risk. And it's not just legal risk. Also, leverage technology. You just need to be creative in ways you're going to leverage technology, because that's the way forward. But the final thing I will say is, even before the COVID times, I did fear and identify that there was a gap in the legal industry, and I call that the development gap. So we're leaders, and when you look behind you, there's a big succession gap. And here we are talking as leaders about the challenges we're facing in the new COVID normality. Imagine what the younger ones are feeling, how challenged they are, perhaps just coming into this industry or having been in this industry for a few years, and then this happens and just throws everything in the air. And we're now talking about a transition from just a lawyer to a business lawyer, or wearing different hats. And I will throw onto the table that perhaps the leaders should take on that responsibility of mentoring the younger ones, coaching the younger ones, holding their hands through this period, so that we'll all come out together at the end of the day, really victorious, and see all this as an opportunity to better ourselves. We can liaise with our professional organizations, but I think we have to take personal ownership of developing those that are coming after us and making sure that we close that gap that I currently see, especially in Africa, that development gap between us and those coming after us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Okay, I would also ask for Naomi to give us her closing remarks.
Okay. Thank you, Darren. I think each use case, we've seen from this webinar that each use case will differ. Everyone has had to learn very important lessons on what could disrupt their company, their industry, and how customers can literally change overnight. But it's very, I think for companies that are able to come out, at the other end of this, it's very beneficial learning experience, because we've been able to, I guess, identify risks very, very quickly, and try and work on, I guess, the survival kit to see how best we can approach these risks. But it's pretty much what everyone has already said. We just need to be more focused on growth and survival, and be more forward-looking and proactive about protecting companies in the future.
Thank you. So I'll just go straight to Sheye. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
I And to start, there's a question that's just been put up by Shadrach, so I'd like to answer it live. His question is that we're not working from that. How are GCs as leaders dealing with matters such as empathy, mental health, and ensuring that colleagues do not burn out and can get help and support when needed? Very, very pertinent. Very, very pertinent. Because one of the challenges of these times with the lockdown and everything are the mental health issues. And it's something that we need to pay particular attention to. The issues of empathy, calling, trying to identify with what people are going through. Because the truth is, this is the first time everyone is facing this kind of situation. So really nobody has an answer. It's not been there before. So unless we all come and work together, that's the way we can navigate it. And like I said when I was talking, I said one of the things that this the lockdown and all this pandemic is brought out more of the humanity. You know, with that too, in the corporate environment, just about the world goals and everything. But now you are finding that you are finding yourself being concerned. You call each other, we have Zoom meetings, we have team meetings and everything. So it is very important. So as general counsel and as leaders, it is our first responsibility. It follows from what Marianne said, which is about working with, developing, coaching, and the truth is even we ourselves have such issues. So, and like you have to first deal with it so that it can be an assistant to another. So it's important. These things are showing us that we're first human beings. And that's what I would take to them, which is that we need to really, really recondition our minds from the programming of the corporate sector, where it's all about goals and trying to make us, because I got to mention it's all about the business, and they say that's professional. No, professionalism is about empathy. It's just the soft areas are as important as the professional skills and development. And so we need, I believe this time has offered all of us an opportunity to pause, rethink, reevaluate our objectives, and then even the way we work. Because you see, one of the issues it raises is about burnout. I don't know whether you guys have experienced when I was working from home it was longer. Nobody knew the boundaries of your time any longer. Before you go home. Now I got to work at 11. I got calls. Everybody was, and so those are the things that we need to manage so that it's not abused. Because what really is happening is that I didn't know about others, but I found myself working longer hours during the lockdown than the normal times. So we need to manage it, But more importantly is the fact that we need to understand that we're first human beings, and it's about man and our relationships first. When we have such relations and we build on them, it will inevitably result in improved productivity at work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to close this out, Sheriff Sam, do you have any closing statements?
Yes, thank you very much. I think from the discussion which has ensued, it's very clear that most organizations are now reviewing their business objectives to align them to the market realities and the performance objectives which have been brought by the pandemic. So perhaps what I will urge the in-house legal counsel, especially those working in the public sector, is that this is not the time when we used to say lawyers are not IT compliance, or perhaps lawyers only know the law. We can stay ahead of the pack. And one of the things we need to do is to take note of the key deliverables across the entire organizations where we are placed, and to use this as a guide to inform our new objectives, which must be aligned to the new normal. The other very important thing is to also review our budgets and determine what resources we need to facilitate us achieve the new targets of service delivery and efficiency in public service. Very important also is also personal development. I think although the challenge which has come may limit us in the way we interlink with the other colleagues, with the other peers in different departments. Once we have set our personal goals, especially looking at the ways to enhance our skills, then we will be able to equip ourselves for the job ahead, because this will pass, it's a season, and as we move forward, we need also to be able to evaluate ourselves and be able to fill the gaps which perhaps have come as a result of this. Thank you very much to all the organizers, and thanks for moderating so well.
Thank you so much, Sheriff Sam. Before I hand over to Cynthia, I just have a few closing comments from my end. I think that it's been an interesting time for all of us, and I can share that even though, you know, before I started working from home in April, I had a check-in with my team members once a month. However, I have found that whilst we are at work, we were just immersed in the job, and we were not actually checking in on, you know, our day-to-day lives. And I have found that in these times, we are actually much more connected, even though we're not seeing each other, because we have a check-in twice weekly. So I think it's important to really take a lot from our current experience. And I just have a few words I want to share with everyone. It's written by a leading lawyer called Anthony Kearns, and it was on LinkedIn, and he stated, "As I sit here in my home office, more productive and connected with my family, my team, my clients, stakeholders, exercising more regularly than I ever did in the last 5 years, I can't help wondering why we needed a pandemic to try this and whether we have learned anything yet. I know that everyone is not having the same experience and many are having it tough. I just hope we don't dutifully return to our offices with all clear understanding without first reflecting on what we want to keep from our current experience." And I think that just sums up my overall view of COVID-19 vis-a-vis how we should face challenges and going forward. Thank you so much to everyone. I'm just going to hand over to Cynthia.
Thank you. A huge thanks to our discussants. Thank you to Darren for being a wonderful moderator. I found this discussion incredibly insightful. I hope that you've also found it useful. I think the exchange of ideas has been fantastic. In building this community for in-house counsel in Africa, Nankunda and I really want to be able to provide platforms and forums for this kind of discussion. So firstly, thank you to the audience. For those of you that registered, thank you for joining. We'd invite you to keep being a part of what we're doing. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have a community on LinkedIn. Hopefully most of you are already connected through that, but if you're not, please do drop me a line and I will happily include you. We also have a distribution list. Please make sure that we have your details because we have lots of exciting activities in the pipeline. We're already liaising with other professional associations who work with in-house counsel across the world. The idea being that we can really elevate the standards and best and skills and networks that exist within this wonderful community of in-house counsel. So yeah, my thanks to our discussants. Thank you so much for putting in the time. Thank you to our moderator for moderating so brilliantly. And we will end it there. Thank you so much for this afternoon. Take care, everybody.